Hello everyone, welcome to Fishin, the podcast where we discuss Legacy's most competitive tribe and help the whole community become better Merfolk players. I'm Kody, one of the co-hosts of the show, and not Kody Smith on Twitter. And we also have, as always, Matt. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great tonight. Got to play a little bit of Magic last night. Just a buddy came over. We play tested some Modern. He's trying to break Bug into Modern. I told him he couldn't do it. After a few hours of play testing, he couldn't do it. So, but that happens, and that's why we're here. Another thing I've been trying to do is I've been working on my Aaron Miller themed commander deck. Wizards, you need to give him more cards to do art on, because I don't have enough cards to fill a whole deck of just his art.
He's done something like 70 cards, I think, or in that neighborhood.
It's not enough, and he needs to do some basics.
Yeah, you really need more than 70 cards to do a commander deck. And
the problem is that he doesn't have a 5-color commander.
That's the other thing I was about to address was on top of not having 70 cards, if you want anything less than 5 colors, you have to, he needs to get some more legendary creatures. So hopefully we'll
Wizards, if you want my money, you will give Aaron more cards, make him have more legends, and hopefully some more lands. So I can have an entire Aaron Miller themed commander deck. That's all I want.
Yes,
not much to ask.
Yeah, Matt's referring to last week we had Aaron Miller on, so if you have not caught that episode, I would go do that. Stop listening.
100%.
Yeah.
It was one of my favorite episodes that we've done. Awesome guy. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on.
So remember that you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook is at fishcastmtg, YouTube as youtube.com/fishcastmtg, Twitch at twitch.tv/fishcastmtg, and Patreon at patreon.com/fishcastmtg, where you can support us monetarily, which we put back into the show. One thing that I wanted to announce that's kind of a big deal for us, and if you follow us on Twitter, you've seen this already. We actually are now affiliated with Inked Gaming. How cool is that?
It's kind of awesome, I have to admit.
Yeah, it's pretty, like, it's like actually like something legit. So we're working on getting, I've uploaded the designs for our playmats to Inked Gaming. But until then, even if you don't want to buy a Fishin playmat or you don't want to wait for a Fishin playmat, you can go to Inked Gaming and do all your shopping as regular. And then when you get to the checkout, use checkout code FISHCAST10 and you will get 10% off your order. And basically all that money comes back to us to help support us on the show. So if you'd like to support us and you're in the market for a playmat, definitely check them out.
No, absolutely. And the playmats that we are going to have are awesome. I am super stoked. I want to get back into playing some competitive Magic that's actually face-to-face with people, so I can kind of show off my new Fishin playmat, and I hope you guys do the same.
Yeah, and that's definitely it's a good way to support the show and kind of get our name out there. When we go out to different places, like I know we're talking about doing some GPs and stuff next year, so we're not completely solid on everything just yet, but we'll definitely be working on having some playmats ready and being able to sling some Magic cards.
Yeah, anybody who's listening to the show knows that we have babies and work and school and lots of other things in our lives. So getting out and actually playing with real people is kind of tough, but we are trying to make this happen so we can go out and interact with you guys.
Yeah, so last night I was working on the playmats. I was sending them out to Inked Gaming, and I got a direct message from a Twitter follower at Extreme Gamer Dad, and he asked me some questions about some Merfolks and stuff, and we were chatting for a little bit, and I said, hey, you know what? Since I've got you, why don't you pick the random Merfolk card? And he gave us a doozy here, Matt. I don't know if we're ever gonna recover from this. This is probably the second worst Merfolk that we've ever looked at, but it is a strictly better Master of the Pearl Trident.
Kinda, essentially.
Essentially. Do you want to read this one, or do you want me to? It's a long one.
I'll read it.
All right.
So it is Triton Shore Thief. It is from Theros. It is 1 blue for a creature Merfolk Rogue, and it's a 1/2. And that's it.
There's a wall of flavor text.
There is a wall of flavor text.
Yeah.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah.
At sunrise, the champion and her companions awoke to find their supplies gone, and Bygus, their sentry, dead. Carefully arranged piles of ornamental shells gave a clear warning. Go no further. The Theriad. I don't know. I mean, that was an okay little story.
Yeah.
I don't mind that.
No. I don't. What I do mind is this card existing.
Honestly, this card is fine. This is totally printed for limited, sealed, or draft. You're playing a blue deck. You remember we had the blue synergies, the devotion decks at the time. So this is a sealed blue devotion card. Turn 1, you drop a 1/2, and hopefully it does something better for you later. After it gets in for like maybe 2 damage, 3 at the most.
Yeah, I was about to say you probably get in for 1 or 2 at this, maybe a 3rd damage if you're extremely lucky, and then you use it to buff up a Master of Waves later.
Yeah, I mean, so in any real format, I mean, sealed is in draft are technically real formats, but any eternal formats, this card is completely unplayable. You're not going to play it in Commander. You're not going to play it in Pauper. It's just bad. But in Theros sealed, I can imagine me drafting this if I was going to be doing a devotion deck.
And I mean, it is your 23rd, 24th card, in a draft. It's not something you're going to put a lot of priority on. But if you get it sent to you and it's in your last 3 and it's in your colors, you'll take it because it's a warm body and that's it.
So one thing I do want to point out, since we did have Aaron Miller on last week, I do want to talk about the art. And I don't know if you realize this, Cody, but this Triton Shore Thief is wearing the dress. Remember the J-Lo dress?
The J-Lo dress.
The J-Lo. Everybody should know what the dress is. That J-Lo dress when she was with P. Diddy. And she showed up with that green thing that was barely a dress. If you look closely, that is 100% what this Triton Short Thief is wearing.
Oh, snap. Maybe she was into magic and we didn't even know it.
Don't be fooled by the rocks that she got.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know what else to say about this card. It's fine.
This card did date Ben Affleck for a little while.
Yeah, Triton Shore Thief and Ben didn't work out though. There's still the custody battle is still raging to this day.
I got nothing else. I'm trying to think of a Ben Affleck J-Lo thing but yeah, Triton Shore Thief does not go with that.
Yeah,
sorry, Ben.
Yeah, yep. Sorry to J-Lo for this whole conversation.
Anyway, we need to talk about J-Lo more on this show. That's what we're really missing.
Absolutely do not. But so what we are going to talk about is a really interesting legacy deck.
Yeah, I'm actually super stoked about this. This deck is really, really spicy. And with everything that's been going on with Arena, we have not hit Legacy in a long time. And I know it's one of my favorite formats. Cody, I'm pretty sure it's still one of yours.
Yes, definitely.
So I am really glad to get back and talking some Legacy.
Yeah, I mean, Legacy is definitely a lot of fun. I still, like, if I'm up, doing schoolwork and I close down everything, I might pop in to play some Magic. And if I don't play Arena, I'm usually playing Legacy. Like, it's just like to get a game or two in, it's, I don't know. To me, it's just the most fun. It's the most concise. Like, I can just, you have a better idea of what you're going to be playing against. I just have a lot more fun with it, personally.
No, absolutely. And I think Legacy is a much better place right now with Deathrite Shaman out of it. So Wizards has done a great job policing the format. So it's in a good spot. You guys should play it if you can. Again, I know it's expensive, so proxy it up and play it with your friends.
Yeah, definitely. It's
proxy, not counterfeit.
Yes. Make them look bad.
Piece of paper in front of a real Magic card on a sleeve.
Yeah, TNN.
That you made yourself.
Yeah. All right, so this deck was piloted by Chris Higashi. Chris Higashi at the Star City Games Open on November 17th. And Matt,
this was the team event.
Yeah. So Matt,
just to be clear.
Yeah, you sent this to me, and I thought it was really cool too. And we just kind of had a lot of stuff on the burner to move before we could put something else on. So what is so cool about this deck, Matt?
So this deck on Star City Games, Chris registered as Mono Blue Wizards. But if you really dig into it, this is a Merfolk deck. But it is completely different than any Merfolk deck that we've played. It's not Legacy Merfolk. It's the traditional version. It's nowhere close to modern Merfolk. but it is awesome.
Or
Or
modern wizards.
or modern wizards for that matter. So Legacy and modern Merfolk kind of go off the same strategy of Merfolk synergy, eventually get Island Walk, control the tempo of the game, beat face, win. Whereas this deck is actually more off the synergy of the wizards in the deck, but it's also more of a control build.
Yes, it's very grindy. This is a very it plays a lot of really interesting wizards, along with a pretty interesting Merfolk shell. That just kind of works together really interestingly. And I mean this deck got eighth, or this team got eighth place. And I don't remember exactly what his opponent or his teammates were playing, but this is just an interesting deck. So do you want to? Yeah, where do you want to start?
Definitely caught our eyes. And one thing I want to say is Kody and I did some research on this. We could not find any video that Star City Games published of Chris piloting this deck. And the conversation online, on Reddit, things like that, was very limited. So we're just kind of going off of our own personal opinions and our own conversations of how this deck would run. And hopefully Kody can maybe play test this a little bit on MTGO. I know some of the cards in here are kind of expensive that aren't traditionally in the Wizards deck or in the Merfolk deck that he plays. But maybe we can save up some money and get him the rest of the cards so we can go out there in the wilds of MTGO and come back with his own personal opinions on this.
Yeah, I've got some people I can talk to about borrowing some cards, so we'll see what we can do. I definitely this would be a fun deck to do a video series on, because it is just so unique, and it attacks at a different angle than traditional Merfolk does. It's a little bit slower, it's a little bit grindier, but you know what? Sometimes it's okay to be a little slow and grindy.
Yeah. Should we just go into talking about the actual cards that are in here?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, so let's start with the land base. It's semi-traditional Merfolk lands, 12 islands, 4 Cavern of Souls, but there's 4 lands that are a little different. You're running 3 wastelands, and you're running.
I will interrupt and say that Wasteland is actually being run now as a 1 or 2 of. Basically, you have a X number of utility lands slots, which you kind of have to split with Mutavaults. So like generally what I mean, like Tuxdev, I think is running 3 Mutavaults and 2 Wastelands, just because of how powerful Wasteland is right now in the format.
Okay, that makes complete sense. But the big thing that we're missing here is we do not play any Mutavaults in this deck.
Yep, not a 1.
But again, as we said, this deck is based off synergy of the wizards that are in it, and not necessarily a Merfolk deck, and it's also not more of an aggro-y deck, it's more of a control deck, so you don't need the extra bodies to start going wide. So what it does play in the last land spot is a Riptide Laboratory, which is an old card from Onslaught, super spicy. So what Riptide Laboratory does, it's taps for 1 generic mana, or you can tap 1 generic mana and a blue and tap it to return target wizard you control to its owner's hand.
And all the Merfolk that we're playing in this deck are all wizards. The biggest thing that I like about this card is, well, actually the 2 things. Number 1, it's just an activated ability. Like, you don't have to sack the land to get the wizard back. You can just keep doing it over and over and over again. Number 2, this is like a really awesome John Avon, like proto-Simic art card. Like, I love the art on this.
Oh, this card is absolutely amazing. I love it. This is one I don't own a copy of. It's one of those ones that it's priced high enough where I just don't want to pick up a random copy, but I don't have a deck that runs it. So
yeah,
but it's not super expensive.
If you need it, then you have it.
Yeah, it's around an $11 card. I mean, you can probably get it for cheaper if you look on eBay or find like a damaged version or a moderately played version, which is sometimes what I do for more expensive cards that are going to be played in Commander or something like that.
Yeah.
But, and if you can't tell, we're intentionally leaving the creatures for last because they're the spiciest part of this deck.
So the spell package is also limited but very familiar to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's running the 4 Aether Vial package, which, as we know, Merfolk is traditionally a Aether Vial deck. In what they say in Legacy, you're either a
Chalice
deck or you're a Force of Will deck, which makes Merfolk the best deck ever because it also plays Force of Will.
Well, I mean, this is basically like you said. This kind of leans more on the synergy of wizards than it does on the synergy of merfolk. Um, and Aether Vial is kind of the cornerstone of any tribal deck. I mean, if you look at humans, you look at, I mean, some spirits decks also play Aether Vial. Like if you're playing a tribal deck, you're playing Aether Vial in a 60 card format at least.
No, absolutely. So this deck is also playing 3 Force of Wills.
Because Force of Will.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes they're going to try to storm before you've had a turn, and you need to stop that from happening.
Yep. Sometimes Force of Will just needs to happen.
Yeah. So, should we talk about some creatures?
Let's do it.
Okay.
This first one's super spicy.
Yeah, so we're going to run through all the creatures, and then we're going to kind of go back and talk about why they're in the deck.
Specific synergies, basically.
Correct. So the first thing we have is Curse Catcher. We all know what Curse Catcher is. 1 blue, sacrifice him, counter target instant sorcery spell. But he's a Merfolk wizard.
Yeah, so it's a body. It feeds into a few other things later on. But the biggest thing, it's Force Spike on a stick, and sometimes in Legacy especially. I mean, obviously Modern, he's kind of fallen off out of favor. But you know what? Force Spike is pretty good sometimes.
In Legacy, absolutely.
Yeah, you
counters Brainstorm.
Yeah, it counters all those 1 mana spells, obviously. Mm-hmm. But then it's like if you go to Force of Will something and they Force of Will back, and then you can just pop Curse Catcher, and they're obviously not paying for Force of Will because they're tapped out. Guess what? You got them. You won that battle. So Curse Catcher is just amazing.
All right, since we're on MTG top 8 and it's alphabetical, we'll go to the next card, and it's super spicy. It's playing 3 Grand Architects.
Ooh.
So Grand Architect is 2 blue and 1 for a creature of Vidalcan Artificer.
There's another Vidalcan. Remember you were saying
I know. They're haunting me. So what Grand Architect does, he is a 1/3, and other blue creatures you control get +1/+1, and it has blue : so you don't have to tap them. You just tap a blue, and if this happens, target artifact creature becomes blue until the end of turn. And then it also has tap an untapped blue creature you control, add 2 mana to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells or activated abilities of artifacts.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Artifact abilities in a Merfolk Wizards deck? What's going on here?
Well, we'll get to that. But one thing I want to push up my glasses about with this card, Grand Architect, is why is this not a legendary creature? Like
because you should be able to play more than one of them at a time.
No,
that's why.
No, I know that's and that's why we're running 3 of them in this deck. But the thing to me is like look at the art on this clown here. He looks like he's leading the way. He's pounding one of his 4 fists on the table in front of him, and he's inspiring people. And what happens when another dude that looks exactly like you steps up to the podium as well? And it's like, oh, this is awkward.
No, it's like the 2 politicians that were cloned from each other in Futurama.
Oh well, I think you mean when it was a Simpsons episode that.
No, it was Futurama when. There were 2 politicians, and they're literally clones of each other, and they have a debate, and he's like, I agree with everything that guy just said.
Well,
you gotta check it out.
There was a similar Simpsons episode where it was when Bill Clinton and Bob Dole were running, and they got abducted, and the aliens Keegan forgot what Jeez, I'm a really bad cartoon podcast host right now. But they basically became them, and they were like holding hands, and but Bill Clinton and Bob Dole were just walking around everywhere holding hands, and they're like, "Why are you holding hands with your opponent, Bill?" And he's like, "If you know a way to transfer DNA strands, I'd like to hear it." So. Anyway,
so far off in the woods.
Yeah. Anyway, Grand Architect is basically a blue creature lord. So this is obvious. We have 33 creatures in this deck, so we're not going to be short creatures. So Grand Architect just kind of pumps everything up, gives us a cool ability that we'll talk about later. So let's just go on to the next creature.
So the next creature is Kira, the Great Glass Spinner, legendary creature, spirit. Not a Merfolk, not a wizard.
Nope.
Not even traditionally a legacy card. This is seen in modern sometimes. But Kira is 2 blue and 1 for a 2/2, has flying, and creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability for the first time in a turn, counter that spell or ability.
Yeah, it's just super good.
Pretty good against some of the spot removal in Legacy. Some Swords of Plowshares and whatnot, especially when you're running a creature-based deck that you need your creatures on the board. So
also it's not something that you should take lightly, that it's a flyer. Sometimes the board gets gummed up, and just having a flyer to just kind of swing in for 3 or 4 a turn with lords, like that's not something that you can just easily dismiss. Like, having a flyer, not too bad.
Absolutely. So the next cards are 2 copies of Legacy staple Master of Waves.
Yes, Master of Waves. Master of Legacy.
Yes. So Master of Waves, 1 blue, 3 of anything for a 2/1. Protection from red. Elemental creatures you control get +1/+1. And when Master of Waves enters the battlefield, put a number of 1/0 blue elemental creature tokens into the battlefield equal to your devotion to blue. So I'm glad we talked about devotion already today, so we don't have to really go into much of that. But again, I remember looking at this deck for the first time, and I saw Master of Waves. I'm like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely an interesting inclusion. But it's a Merfolk wizard, so
it is a wizard.
It's a Merfolk and a wizard, so it meets our synergy for the deck.
And it has 100% a reason to be in here.
Yeah, and which can keep going. We'll talk about it when we get there.
Okay, so the next card is Merfolk Trickster. It's a 4 of. We're not going to talk about this card at all because we all know what this is. Next, again, 4 Silvergill Adepts. I'm not going to talk. Best fish. Not going to talk about it. We all know what this is. Trickster and Silvergill, both Merfolk Wizards, though. After that, we're playing 4 Spell Scutter Sprites. Again, another Legacy staple.
Yeah, of course. Pauper All-Star.
Yeah, Pauper All-Star and Legacy staple Spell Scutter Sprite. So for those of you who don't play Pauper, since we don't talk about it much on the show because we have not gotten a Pauper Merfolk deck yet, it is 1 blue and 1 of anything for a Fairy Wizard. It's a 1/1, it has flash and flying, and when Spell Scutter Sprite enters the battlefield, counter target spell with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of fairies you control.
So, I mean, this honestly, this actually does make a lot of sense if you think about it, because this is there's another fairy, but we'll get to that one later. But with Spellstarter Sprite, there are so many cards in Legacy that cost 1 or 2 mana that this thing can just stop a brainstorm. It can stop a Swords to Plowshares. It can stop a Bolt. Like, this is just, it's crazy how much, like, if you sit down and list off, the first couple cards that you think of in Legacy, like, this handles a lot of the problems. So it's
absolutely,
it basically kind of does stop our opponent from, shenaniganing.
And realistically, like, turn 1 with this deck, like any tribal deck, we're probably going to want to play an Aether Vial. So we're not too worried about the turn 1 spell. It's if we have the Force of Will, we have it. If they're going to really go off on turn 1 and destroy us, they got it. Otherwise, they're going to get their first Brainstorm. They're going to get their first whatever. But after that, turn 2, you can flash in your Spell Scutter Sprite and knock out the next 1 converted mana cost spell they play. And not only that, but you have a body on the field.
That can get pumped by Grand Architect.
They can be pumped by Grand Architect, and again, it flies.
Yep.
So the next card is a 2 of. It's the other fairy in the deck, and that's 2 Vitalian Clicks. Again, so this card is actually seen a little bit more in Legacy, really, than pretty much everything else we've talked about, but it's still really spicy. Click, again, because we don't talk about much on this show, so we'll talk about it now, is 2 blue and 1 for a 3/1 legendary creature Fairy Wizard. It has flash flying. When Click comes into the battlefield, look at target player's hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, put it on the bottom of his or her library, and then the player draws a card.
So you can target yourself to kind of check on what's going on, or you can check on what your opponents, especially if they brainstorm. Like, this is something really cool that you can mess up their stacking. So
or they're tucking,
yeah, or they're tucking. So it's like if they're like, nope, this needs to go away, then you can go like, No, you don't want that one either.
Yeah. Another thing that is good to remember with this is it's a May ability. So if you click somebody and they have just garbage in their hand, you can just be like, yeah, that's fine. You don't get a draw card.
Yeah, it's also just information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a 3/1, which is nothing to rub your nose at or snub your nose at or whatever the phrase is.
Yeah, it's a beater. It'll put some damage, put some points on the board in your favor. So Vendilion Click, awesome.
Yeah, and if anything, if it sucks up a bolt or if it ends up sucking up a Swords to Plowshares, it's already done a lot of damage by either A, giving you the information, or B, ripping something from their hand, or both. So, yeah, just a great card. Absolutely amazing. It's a reason why it is been printed a million times at this point. It's still a $20 card. So the next card is a human wizard, actually, and that is our good friend Venser, who's actually played in the regular Legacy Merfolk deck.
Yeah, he's played in Legacy in the sideboard, and then also it kind of sneaks in to the sideboard of Modern Merfolk every once in a while as well, depending on what's going on. But Venser is just a super cool, again, another wizard with flash.
Yes, so he has flash. He's 2 blue and 2 of anything for a 2/2. And when he comes into play, return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. So it's kind of like a remand, except for you don't get to draw a card, but you get a Venser on the battlefield instead. And then also, it can bounce if you need to. So it's a great utility card, especially in a deck like this.
It's remand for permanence.
Exactly.
And so Venser's just super good. Again, this helps out with a lot of things like Ensnaring Bridge is kind of a problem for creature decks. It can bounce, like if they reanimate something, you can bounce an Elish Norn or whatever back to their hand, so they can't really recast it at that point. And also for like Sneak and Show is really another reason that Venser's in a lot of blue decks in Legacy. Because it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to put in Emrakul. And you go, okay, well, I'm going to put in Venser. Put Emrakul back in your hand. That's
exactly.
pretty sweet.
So there's 5 cards left. And I think these are the 5 oddest cards in the deck. But I think they're really the reason why this deck can actually be played. So there's 1 Walking Ballista. We all know what Walking Ballista is. It's double X for a construct? Yeah, an artifact creature construct. And it enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it, and then it has 4: put a 1/1 counter on Walking Ballista, and has remove a 1/1 counter from Walking Ballista. It deals 1 damage to target creature or player. So it's just amazing. It's one of the best cards printed in the last 5 years.
Yeah, no, Ballista is pretty nuts.
It's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
It's played in, I think, every format now except for Standard because it's rotated. But
yeah.
It's played in Modern, it's played in Legacy, and it's played in Vintage. So,
and I'm sure there's even a case for it in Commander. I mean, there's
yes,
the second you get an infinite mana combo going, then you just go Walking Ballista, make 1 billion mana, put 1 billion counters on Walking Ballista, kill everything.
Yes, exactly. So the last card is the engine of this deck, in my opinion. And this is Patron Wizard. And if you don't know what Patron Wizard is, that's okay, because this is a very obscure card. So it's a rare that's only been printed once, all the way back in Odyssey. And it's 3 blue. So blue, blue, blue for a creature wizard. That's a 2/2. And it has tap an untapped wizard you control, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1.
That's so beautiful.
This is bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. So realistically, I mean, if you haven't guessed it, if this thing hits the battlefield, there's a good chance that your opponent will never play a spell again.
because your whole board is wizards, except for with a few minor exceptions.
And there's 33 creatures, and you're gonna probably have at least a couple down.
Yeah. I think there's one more creature that you missed, though, is Harbinger of the Tides.
Oh, did I miss? Okay, sorry. Please.
Harbinger of the Tides is blue for a Merfolk wizard. Again, a wizard. It's a 2/2, and you may cast Harbinger of the Tides as though it had flash if you pay 2 more. If you pay 2 generic more to cast it. When Harbinger of the Tides enters the battlefield, You may return target tapped creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand.
Yeah. So just Value Town USA.
Yeah.
So this deck is absolutely bonkers, and I love it.
Yeah. So what I mean, do you want to go over the sideboard real quick before we get into some synergies?
Let's just run through the sideboard. So it's 1 back to basics, 1 Grand Architect, so you can have up to 4, 1 Grip of Phyresis, which I've never heard of this card before.
I've actually thought about running this in the sideboard. It's really good against Death and Taxes, because then they're like so Sword of Fire and Ice.
Let's read this. So it's an instant for 1 blue and 2, and it has gain control of target equipment. Then create a 0/0 black germ creature token and attach the equipment to it. So it's Walking Ballista. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So this is 100% for Death and Taxes or any of those decks that are floating out there that are playing swords and things like that.
Oh yeah, you just I mean, they do all that work to get their Sword of Fire and Ice. That's what they always get against Merfolk. They always get Sword of Fire and Ice, which is not like that's the correct play. You get Sword of Fire and Ice. So they get Sword of Fire and Ice. They put it into play, with Stoneforge Mystic, and then they go equip. And then you go Grip of Phyresis, and then they're sad.
Yeah. Which one of the things I love about this card too is it's got a germ on it, and then it has a sort of Body of Mind like sticking out of its face. It's super cool. So if you haven't seen this card, please check it out. But the rest of the sideboard is an additional Kira the Great Glass Spinner, so you can have up to 2, 2 Misdirections, and just for those of you who don't know, Misdirection is 2 blue and 3 of anything, and you may exile a card from your hand rather than play Misdirection's mana cost. So it's very similar to Force of Will, except you don't take the damage. And then you can change the target of target spell with a single target.
Yeah, Misdirection is kind of like a budget Force of Will. If you don't have money for Force of Will, you can just run Misdirection and be kind of okay.
But it doesn't hit creatures because it has to target a target that targets. Yes, there's 3 targets in that sentence, which I love.
No, I that's what I said. Like it's definitely a budget Force of Will. If you don't have Force of Wills, then this is a okay replacement.
Yeah, well, it's also like against something like Burn or something along those lines.
Yeah, where you can just kind of run it back to their face or
their
counter their counters. Yeah,
any heavy based creature deck or like artifact synergy deck. I mean, this isn't coming in. So, but next is 2 Mistcallers. We have Sneak and Show in this format, so you need Mistcallers. You have Reanimator in this format. You need Mistcallers.
Yeah, Mistcallers good for that, for sure.
Yeah. You have 1 Pithing Needle, 2 Surgical Distractions, 1 Tormod's Crypt, and 3 more Walking Ballistas if one's just not enough.
I mean, honestly, like if you're going to be playing Walking Ballista, you might as well play the 4.
Yeah. So let's talk about the synergies. And let's just talk about our friend Walking Ballista first, because that's kind of so when we started talking about this a couple days ago, the first thing Kody asked me is like, why Walking Ballista? And I'm like, I don't know. So we kind of started digging into it. And the first thing you got to go to is the Grand Architect, correct?
Oh, Grand Architect makes Walking Ballista nuts. Like it's one of those things. I know Ben Bateman on the Masters of Modern podcast has always tried, like it's his pet card. Like he's tried to make Grand Architect a thing for a long time in Modern, and so like he has all these wacky brews where he's playing Grand Architect, and I mean Walking Ballista is basically the piece that gets closest to breaking Grand Architect.
See, the only problem is I think it works in Legacy because you can have such bonkers counter magic, whereas in Modern you don't. Plus, Legacy is a lot more grindy, whereas Modern is like just lightning fast.
Oh no, yeah, I totally agree. Like, but that's why I said it's kind of the thing that gets closest to breaking it. It's not, especially in Modern, you don't have the time.
No,
especially right now with the meta right now, you do not have time to blink more than 3 times.
So think about this. So Grand Architect is the lord of the deck. So essentially everything in here, except for the Walking Ballista, gets the +1/+1 automatically.
There's also Kira the Great Glass Spinner and Spellstarter Sprite's a wizard. I think that's it.
The other blue creatures.
Oh yeah, never mind.
Yeah,
my last.
Yeah. So anyway, it has tap an untapped blue creature you control to add 2 to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast artifacts, spells, or activated abilities of artifacts. So, if you have a ballista in your hand and you have a mini board that's, let's say, 3 blue creatures and the mana that you have. So let's say 4 mana and 4 blue creatures, just for funsies. With Grand Architect, those 4 blue creatures are all 1 counter on your incoming Walking Ballista, plus an additional potential 2 from your mana. So you have a Walking Ballista that comes in at 6.
They're all Ancient Tombs.
They're all Ancient Tombs. And just to make it even more fun, you can use that 2 for activated abilities of artifact creatures. What does Walking Ballista do? For 4 mana, put an additional 1/1 counter on him.
That is definitely, I think that's the key part. So okay, it has basically Convoke for artifacts. Before Convoke for artifacts was a thing, but it basically has double Convoke, and then on top of that, it's like double Convoke for activated abilities, which in the case of Walking Ballista, is dumb and broken.
Hey Kody, what about Master of Waves? And Walking Ballista and Grand Architect.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that?
I did think about that. That was actually the first example. I went, oh no, if like even if you just have 5, let's say you have 5 devotion. So let's say you have a Grand Architect, which is 2 devotion from just 1 creature, right? Then you have
Master of Waves himself.
A Master of Waves, then you have like
Harbinger.
You have a Harbinger and a Silvergill, right? So that's like 6 devotion right there. Let me double check that math. 1, 2.
That is 6.
The 6. So I mean, you get 6 creatures out of that. That's 12 mana for Walking Ballista.
And theoretically, after you play your Master of Waves, they're all untapped.
Yeah, they're all untapped, and
that's just 6 mana from the tokens, not the other creatures that devoted the tokens into play.
So the other thing that I really do want to bring up about Grand Architect, as well as with Patron Wizard, which I'm sure we're going to spend a little bit of time discussing in a moment, is both of these creatures have these kind of nuts abilities, but they don't have tap abilities. Like they're taps, but it's the tap is not part of the cost. So with Grand Architect, it just says tap an untapped blue creature you control. So you could tap Grand Architect the turn it comes into play. Mm. It's not tap an untapped blue creature you control.
Yeah.
so like that is just nuts. And the same thing with Patron Wizard. It just says tap an untapped wizard you control. You can just tap Patron Wizard the turn it comes in to force spike something. That is.
Can you tell insane. How much fun this deck is?
Oh gosh.
This looks so bonkers.
It is very interesting for sure.
So the next package is the control package. So first of all, you have your 4 Cavernous Souls. So like I said before, you're either a Force of Will deck or you're a
Vile deck.
No, not a Vile deck. I messed up. A Chalice of the Void deck. That's what I meant.
Yeah, Chalice
earlier.
of the Void.
I am so sorry. So yeah, you're either a Force of Will deck, you're a Chalice of the Void deck. But Cavernous Souls says you cannot be countered. So your creature deck, you name wizards with your Cavernous Souls, and so all those mono blue decks and all those Chalice decks can go pound something because you're getting right through all that. And a lot of the cards in their hand are just going to sit there and die.
On top of just with Patron Wizard just being able to force spike multiple times a turn. So it's like if they sit there and they cast something, you spend all of their mana to just try to get one thing through, and it won't even resolve. And then you untap, and then you go, here's 9 mana for a Walking Ballista.
Exactly. So let's talk Patron Wizard. 1, he's 3 mono blue, but in this deck we don't necessarily care because everything's either blue or a Walking Ballista. And the Walking Ballista potentially can be blue with a Grand Architect.
Yeah.
But the tap and untap wizard you control. This is absolutely insane in this deck. Now, I was reading a lot of people say this is a very degenerate card, and it causes a lot of hate in like Commander games, but it hadn't really found a home in Legacy because the only mono blue Legacy deck really was the Merfolk deck, and there was no place for Patron Wizard. Now, this deck doesn't exist without this card, essentially.
Yeah, Patron Wizard is definitely a big piece of this because with this deck in particular, you do have Force of Will backup. So you have ways to get your creatures into play uncounterable with Cavern Souls. Then you have Force of Will backup even after that. So like if for some reason you are needing to cast something, you got the Force of Will backup. But so basically, once Patron Wizard comes into play, um, you don't really need to worry about wasting a Force of Will.
And
Almost
I want to point this out before I forget. The art looks like an grumpy Art Garfunkel.
Yeah, it does. He even wears scarves like that.
He does. So if you catch Art Garfunkel and he's grumpy, he's a Patron Wizard.
Well, now, the only thing that the only concern I have for this deck, and again, I want to play this deck. Like this looks like a lot of fun. My only concern with this deck is it seems a little slow to set up.
Oh, 100%. That's the issue I have with it. So you're not really doing anything for turns 1 and 2. You're essentially allowing your opponent to kind of run wild. The only things you'll have to combat your opponent on the early game are the Curse Catchers and the Force of Wills. And that's essentially it.
Yeah, because that pretty much everything in this deck is 2 mana or higher, and even then, you're spending your first turn to get it, like you said, an Aether Vial down, or a Curse Catcher, and then even a lot of the cards like Spellstutter Sprite and Harbinger of the Tides, those are situational 2-drops. Like you don't want to just be burning those out. You want to kind of situate them, and yeah, like that's kind of like I said.
I imagine being on the draw on this deck is really rough.
Yeah,
like the die roll has to be really important.
And the sideboard seems like it kind of, at least for the most part, tries to compensate for that with like surgical extractions, the added misdirections if you're playing against a deck that's super quick.
Mistcallers a 1-drop, Pithy Needles a 1-drop.
Yeah.
Tormod's Cryptus is a 0.
Yeah. So it seems like this deck, the sideboard is kind of like, oh no, I'm on the draw, and these are the cards that'll help fix that.
Yeah. But once you get to turn 3, the counter magic package is insane, especially if you drop to Cavern of Souls and that cavern has not been wastelanded.
Yeah,
because at that point, the control decks in Legacy aren't really gonna be able to do that much.
Yeah, and one other thing that I did want to point out with Aether Vial, so in Modern and Legacy Merfolk, one of the biggest problems that Aether Vial has, the biggest problem that I have with it, is you basically almost never go up to 3 or 4. Now in Legacy, you'll go up to 3 if you if you have a second one, you're fine with it going to 3. But with this deck, like honestly, having a vial go up to 3 or 4 isn't that bad, because we have 4-drops in Venser and Master of Waves, and like I could feel nothing better in this deck than having your opponent go, all right, pass the turn, and you go Master of Waves, untap.
So we're running out of time, but I do want to touch on the Legacy meta real quick. So I'm on MTG Goldfish. I'm just looking at the top 8 of the Legacy meta. And obviously your meta can be completely different, but this was played at an SEG Open. And this is one that top 8'd. So they went in there thinking they were going to be playing against the decks that were most prominent in the meta, which would be these. So number 1 is Sneak and Show. Number 2 is Grixis Delver. Number 3 is Miracles. Number 4 is Ad Nauseam. 5 Eldrazi Post. 6 Grixis Control. 7 Burn. And 8 Golgari Depths. So realistically, out of those 8 decks that are in the top of the meta, the only lightning fast deck there is Burn.
Yeah.
So if you can dodge Burn, you have a lot of time to work with. Sneak and Show is very slow.
Yeah.
Grixis Delver Grixis Delver is kind of slow. It can have explosive starts, but Miracles is like
a glacial deck.
Glacially slow. Ad Nauseam can be kind of fast, depending on what kind of hand they get.
Yeah, if they have a nut hand, then they have a nut hand. And it's the same thing with Reanimator. If they've
Yeah,
got it, they've got it. And
exactly. You just tip your hat and you move on. And same with the Golgari depths. I can imagine Golgari depths being a little bit of a issue, but that's probably part of the reason why they have the 3 wastelands in there as well. And then
yeah,
Eldrazi Post, I mean, it can get big really, really quickly, but I think you're going to be okay because by the time they can really start doing some crazy things, it's going to be turn 3-ish. So at that point, you should have your board set up where you can start really controlling the pace of the game. So I can see where he's going with this.
and the other thing that's really important to note with all these decks that you listed off, with Turbo Depths, Grixis, ad nauseum, most of these decks, like you said, they take a little bit of time to set up, and basically their haymakers cost 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a patron wizard down and we're able to just like stop them from tapping out to cast their their like in turbo depths, like if they cast a crop rotation, like they're done because you can just go force spike and they're like, all right, pay 1, and then you go force spike again. And then and then they just go, all right. And I mean they have ways around it, I mean, because you can do that combo without having to like search for it, but that definitely turns them off by a lot.
Yeah. And a lot of these decks just don't play a lot of land either.
Yeah, well, I mean that too, but that speaks to like, most legacy decks, unless you're cheating in cards like with Reanimator or with Sneak and Show, your things kind of top out at 3, and so
you don't need that much land.
Yeah, there just aren't anything big that you would be doing that isn't cheaty, and so it's like if you can just stop them for a whole turn, even that's a pretty huge deal.
Yeah,
and then you have Force of Will backup once your wizards are tapped down. So yeah, this does seem like a fun deck.
Yeah, and realistically, if you have the rest of the modern or legacy Merfolk deck, nothing in here is insane financially. So Riptide Laboratory, as I said, is about $10 to $12 in paper. It's only 0.74 tickets. And then you have Patron Wizard, which is about between $13 and $15 in paper. It's only 1.88 tickets. So, and then other than that, I mean, Spellscatter Sprite's a common. You already have your Vencers. I mean, if you don't have Ballistas, that'd be your only issue. It's 7 tickets in MTGO and about $15 to $20 in paper, depending on the day. So, I mean, and then Grand Architects, that's the other one you're missing, which is 0.05 tickets or about $2 to $3 in paper. So, I mean, we're not talking a huge swing in money to play this deck.
Yeah, it looks like online Walking Ballista is kind of the big one at around $7.
Yeah.
So
you're looking at $28. I mean, yeah. I think you can add it on to your MTGO for about $30.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was getting at. Is just there's
super reasonable though.
Lot. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, especially super reasonable considering we're talking legacy.
Yeah. Well, and that's assuming that you have the Merfolk deck all together already.
Correct.
All right. Is there anything else you want to say about this deck before we?
Yeah, I will say one thing. If you don't have a legacy deck put together and you're debating between this and Merfolk, I would put the Merfolk deck together first. One, it has more staying power. This deck is only placed once. It only has been around for one. I don't know if we'll see it again. I don't know if this is just a spicy blip on the radar or if it's a new piece of the meta that's kind of just emerging. But Merfolk isn't going anywhere. And also, Merfolk's going to probably be easier to play than this. This seems like it's going to be a very difficult deck to pilot. So, if you're just buying into Legacy for the first time, I would do Merfolk first and then build into this later. But again, it's not going to cost you that much to get both.
Yeah, I agree with Matt's sentiments. Merfolk is kind of a more long-standing deck, and it's kind of one of those things that no matter what happens, it doesn't go away. And this deck could really be. It could have just been a meta call, and it could have been. It could have been Chris sitting down with his teammates and going, "Well, look at these are the top decks. We have time to set up, and we have time to mess around a little bit." So.
And he was also playing in a team event, so it wasn't necessarily just him. He just had 2 of the 3 of his teammates, including him, had to win to move on.
Yeah, and so he may have been carrying the team. He may have been the dead weight. So I mean, unless we go and really dig into Star City's records, which neither of us really have quite the time to do all that, it would be one of those things that we would really have to dig to find what's going on.
But either way, this deck looks like a blast.
Oh yeah,
I'm really hoping that you buy into the cards, Kody.
Yeah, no, there's only a few things that I don't have that I was looking at. I've got the Forces. I've got the Walking Ballista, Grand Architect. I need. Yeah, there's a few things. For some reason, I have not gotten any Patron Wizards. It's really weird.
Get them soon before they spike up on you.
Before they spike because of this deck.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for stopping by and hanging out with us. Remember, you can reach out and talk to us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook is at fishcastmtg. I am on Twitter is at @NotCodySmith. And Matt, where can we find you?
You can find me sometimes at Matthew Caudill 8.
All right. And then if you have a longer form question, feel free to email us at fishcastmtg@gmail.com. Remember, also, if you're shopping at inkedgaming.com, use code FISHCAST10 at checkout to help support your favorite local fish podcast. That would be really helpful, and we appreciate Inked Gaming for partnering with us in that way. So that's really cool of them. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
Our cover art was made by Tessa and Hunter Pruitt, and our logo and stream art was done by @Ishton, and our playmat art was done by @Ishton on Twitter. If you like what we're doing here, please rate and subscribe in the Apple or Google Play podcast app stores, as well as find us on Patreon at patreon.com/fishcastmtg. Thank you very much for your time, and we will see you all next week.
Have a good night, everyone.